Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. Today I'm going to present my paper, Firewall for Innovation. So in the past 5 years, we've seen there's a growing trend of protectionism in the digital economy. And this is mainly aimed at fostering domestic innovation. One of the rationales for the switch towards the industrial policy in digital economy is an old idea. Basically, market failure due to static and dynamic externalities need to be addressed by policy intervention to cultivate domestic innovation and also increase the competitiveness of domestic firms. What's more interesting about the industrial policy in the digital economy is that several features of digital markets introduce fresh dynamics into industrial policy consideration. One feature of the digital goods is that it has non-reverse nature. Think about inputs like data, intermediaries like software libraries. They all can be used simultaneously with different entities without depletion, which means that it can generate external economy and amplify the technological achievements. The second feature is the evolution of learning methods. Digital tools such as A/B testing, machine learning can enable data-driven decision-making rather than the traditional on-job learning, which means that this can help firms to quickly have knowledge acquisition. So in this paper, I answer traditional whether and how questions of industrial policy, but in the digital economy. And the question is that whether protectionist policies foster domestic innovation, if so, and how? And my answer in this paper is that protectionist policies can indeed spur innovation, and part of the mechanism that I investigate in this paper is by expanded data collection and data sharing. So I use the context, which is about the mobile app industry in China under the Great Firewall. One of the famous and infamous feature of China's internet is the Great Firewall. It is the largest internet regulation system globally. However, although it is driven by political incentives, it is a de facto protectionist policies in digital economy. Around 1,800 popular domains are blocked in China. And for mobile apps, it is right now the cornerstone of consumer-facing digital economy. More than 60% of internet traffic come from mobile devices, and is increasingly with mobile apps. China has seen a great success in this industry in the past 10 years. According to the report from the World Bank, China has the world's most localized app market, and it also is the only country that can rival the US in global app markets. However, China's success, the lesson behind China's success in this industry is very understudied. What's more nice about the mobile industry is that it provides novel measurement for technology and data at product and month level. Very different from traditional manufacturing products, digital products are built with codes, meaning that if you compare version by version of all these digital products, you can provide granular data for technology tracking. Furthermore, this is also a very fast-moving industry. 75% top iOS apps update at least once in a month, which means that any market shock in this industry can be quickly reflected on a monthly basis. So in this paper, I first assess the causal effect of protectionist policies on innovation. And the first variation, to identify the causal effects, the first variation that I utilize is the variation from staggered monthly timing of foreign app blockages. And then I need to define, okay, there's a blockage happening. What's the target app in China? Therefore, I identify Chinese substitutes for blocked foreign apps using machine learning tools, and I apply them on the baseline text descriptions of the apps. And then for outcome, I construct the measurement for technology and provide product month level measurement for technology change from 2 dimensions. One is quantity, and the other is the competitiveness. Combining the 2 variations and apply them on outcome, I show that with a positive demand shock after the blockage. Blockage of foreign substitutes spur domestic innovation and cultivate local tech ecosystem. And secondly, there are a lot of ways that blockage can influence innovation, but I focus on a new policy-relevant channel, which is how blockage influence data collection practice and how this further influence innovation. And I first show that after the blockage, Chinese apps are collecting 22% more types of data within the app, and also share 9% more types of data with third parties. And this indicates that the scope of data that owned by Chinese apps are increasing. The second piece of evidence is that there is an internal economy of data. By leveraging a quasi-random experiment from the introduction of new data access, I estimate that 1% increase in the types of data that an app has will induce 2% more increase in technology development. And the last piece of evidence is the external economy of data. By leveraging a specific type of data sharing network, which I will introduce later, I show that there's a positive spillover effect on innovation through this network. And with the three evidence together, this suggests that the expanded data collection and data sharing can potentially be one important channel for the positive effect of blockage on innovation. Okay, so let me dive into how I construct a measurement for technology and also what's my empirical strategy. So to measure technology and data collection practice, I collect monthly data on 230,000 iOS apps from 6,000 Chinese firms in the past 10 years. And to measure technology, it is commonly used patents or R&D investment. However, in this paper, I use libraries to track technology. So what is libraries? If you decompile any app raw code, and here I decompile TikTok, which is developed by ByteDance, and you can find a lot of libraries that I'm showing you here. And this specific library, you can find this is a live stream functionality for TikTok, and it's developed by ByteDance. So this is an in-house library that is, which means that this is developed by developers themselves. However, so using the number of libraries, you can quantify the technologies in an app. What's more, like not only in-house libraries, you can find domestic third-party libraries. And the second example that I'm showing you here, this is a functionality which is about crash report, which is developed by Tencent and for TikTok. And you can also have foreign third-party libraries. And the third example that I'm showing you here, this is image pipeline functionalities that is provided by Facebook to TikTok. And on average, for each app, in our sample, we can observe 0.5 times at monthly level. And this is the trend for the average number of raw codes that in my sample. So after we have the measurement for technology, now we want to measure data collection practice. So in the raw codes of an app, you can find something called you can find a configuration file for an app. And this here, I'm showing you an example of the configuration file. And in this configuration file, there's something called information property key. And for the rest of the talk, I'll just call it key. And the key is a unique identifier for data access if they're related to user data. And the example that I'm showing you here, this app is collect location data, camera data, photo data, Face ID, and microphone. So this by counting how many keys in this app, we can have a measurement for data scope. Furthermore, Apple also requires apps to provide privacy labels, and these labels are for users to understand what kind of data are collected by each app. And this provides two main information for data collection practice. The first is whether this data is sensitive or not. The second is whether this data is shared with third parties or not. By counting how many keys are under each privacy labels, we can have a quantification for the number of data that falls into each data collection practice. So now I have the outcomes. The second task is to estimate the causal effect of blockages. And this is an event study design which combines two sorts of variation. The first variation is the variation in treatment timing, which is basically just come from the fact that foreign apps are blocked at different times on a monthly by monthly basis. What I want to mention here is that all this blockage that I have in my sample is mostly political. Even 40% are by accident, and very different from traditional industry policy, I know. And also, like, by the nature of these blockages, the government won't notice the public, so it's very unexpected, at least on month level. The second variation that I use is the variation in exposure. Basically, I want to define which app is targeted, so I apply machine learning tools applied on baseline app descriptions, and I classify foreign domestic app pairs into 3 categories: substitutes, complements, and neutral. And because complements is just end up with a very small sample, it's just 2% in my sample, so I drop them and just focus on substitutes and neutral in my following analysis. Then I can estimate the causal effect of foreign app blockage using this regression. This is an app month level regression. Basically, I just compare domestic apps before and after the blockage of their foreign substitutes to domestic apps that are not yet and never traded. So, why is like technologies or data collection practice? The quantity of technologies that are in an app in a month, and also data that an app has in a month. So, yes. Oh, that's a good question. So, one very good example, and it's the only example I know, is MIT. So MIT is blocked in China, and it's not because MIT is political or I don't know. It's because MIT shares the same IP address as a radical organization in China, and because the radical organization is blocked in China, and therefore induce cause the blockage of MIT in China. So that's an example of an accident. Okay, so the first set of evidence that I want to show you is the effect of blockage on innovation, and I will investigate them from 2 dimensions, quantity and competitiveness. So the first thing that I want to show you is actually the effect of blockage on user bases, and is measured by monthly active users. I think there are 2 purposes to look at this. One is to validate my measurement for substitutes and neutral, and the second is to show you, although this is a political-driven policy, this is de facto work as a protectionist policy. And indeed, like before, you see before the blockage, there is no effect on user base, but after the blockage, it increased by 30% after 2 years. And then we can move to the measurement about technology, and we find that the number of technology developed by an app, which is measured by the number of in-house libraries, also increased after the blockage, and is by 14%. Furthermore, what we can look at is the third-party libraries. Basically, how many Tencent libraries are used by TikTok. And we can find similar to domestic apps, TikTok is now using more Tencent libraries, which is indicated by the red lines and dots. However, if you look at libraries developed by Facebook, there's a decrease in foreign third-party libraries after the blockage, and this divergence in domestic and foreign technology adoption suggests that there's expansion of domestic ecosystem. And secondly, I want to show you the competitiveness of Chinese technologies. And this is measured by the percentage of apps that are adopting Chinese firms' technologies in each month and in different countries, foreign countries. So the regression that I'm showing you here compares Chinese technologies before and after the blockage of their foreign competitors to the technologies developed by companies that are not yet and never traded. And you can see that after the blockage, the percentage of apps that are in the foreign markets with Chinese apps increase, and especially for Asian countries. And this evidence shows that Chinese technologies are getting higher quality, and their competitiveness are also increasing. Okay, so I already showed you the first set of evidence. The second evidence is about how blockage influenced the data collection practice and how they further influence the innovation. So I already mentioned that the number of keys can be a measurement for data collection. And here, the specific measurement for the data collection is the number of sensitive and non-shared keys in an app. And we can find that after the blockage, the number of sensitive and non-shared keys increased by 22%, which means there's an increase in the scope of data. And also, if we further consider the 30% increase in user base, the total overall data collection increased by 50% in a Chinese app. And for data sharing, which is measured by the number of sensitive and shared keys, we can also find there's a 9% increase after 2 years, which means that there's also an expansion in data sharing network after the blockage. So we see, okay, there's an expansion in data collection and data sharing. Then how would this increased data influence innovation? And the first evidence is about the internal economy of data. Basically, we want to estimate the return of data on library development. And here, I'm regressing the changes in innovation on the changes in data. And this changes in data is instrumented by this IV, which is called data enhancing keys. And this is a shift share IV. The shift part comes from the fact that the new keys are introduced by exogenously introduced by the iOS system, which is unexpected for apps. And the share part comes from the pre-existing condition of an app's data collection, which will determine whether this new keys introduced by Apple is data enhancing or not. So this is a shift share IV. And because the possible endogeneity of the pre-existing condition of an app, we want to control for the average number of data enhancing keys by reshuffling all the introductions. Therefore, we can guarantee that the variation that we are using here is just come from the quasi-random experiment from the introduction of new keys. So here I'm showing you the regression result. And for the first stage, we can find that when there is one increase in data enhancing keys, the app will react to that and will increase 0.016 keys about user data. And this shows the relevance of the IV. And then you probably will think, okay, this changes in keys in the iOS system might relate to other changes in the iOS system and will further influence innovation. And then I show you two outcomes which use non-user data related keys and the number of iOS libraries, and I find minimum and no effect. So which means that the effect is mainly come from the fact that apps are increasing their data collection. And lastly, I show you the IV results, which suggest that one increase in data will further increase more in-house library development in an app, but there is no effect on the third-party libraries, suggests that this is mainly come from the internal efforts of an app. So we've seen there's evidence for internal economy, and the next thing that we want to see is whether there's an external economy of data. And to do that, we want a data sharing network. And the specific data sharing network that I'm using here is the data transmission through insecure network. And before 2017, most of tech firms are using insecure networks in China. This is largely just because GFW is more effective with insecure networks. And starting from 2015, data transmission over insecure networks need to be reported in their configuration file, and this is requested by Apple to all the app developers, which means that I can establish a linkage between data provider and data receiver And using the data between 2015 and 2017, I established a network between 3,000 apps and 5 firms. And this is basically the structure of the network. Then the question is, what if the foreign competitor of data provider is blocked, and what's the influence on data receiver? And I can interact the data sharing linkages with the blockage of foreign substitutes to estimate the effect on data provider. And here I show you the results. And this is the results now think about this is Tencent, and who is the data receiver, and TikTok is the data provider, and Instagram is blocked as the foreign substitutes of TikTok. And we can find that after the blockage, Tencent also increased their in-house library development, but there is little effect on the third-party libraries. And this suggests that the blockage of substitutes for the data provider induce positive effects on data receivers' in-house library development. And I also do 2 placebo effects to isolate the treatment and also the insecure network, and both of the placebo has no effects, and suggests that these 2 factors need to be combined to have so that the blockage can have positive effects on data receiver. So to conclude, protectionist policies can indeed spur innovation in digital economy, and it's in part through the expand data collection and data sharing. And here I want to reassessing the arguments for industrial policy that we bring up at the beginning of the talk, and especially for protectionist policies. Like, to finally determine whether protectionist policies is optimal is a very difficult empirical work, because we need to pin down the source and also the magnitude of externality. But I think here, the evidence that we've seen provides some very strong suggestive evidence for the protectionist policy. And the first is the growth of domestic ecosystem and data sharing networks, which indicates the externalities that is generated by these network effects. And the second is the positive spillover from expanding data sharing networks. However, I think, externalities won't be generated unless we give the property rights over data to consumers. And this is discussed in Jonas and Tonetti's work published in 2020 AER. It's a very good paper. Please check that. I really like that. And finally, the dynamic learning from data that we've seen can probably support the argument for protectionist policies if firms are credit constrained or myopic. And with that, that's the end of my talk, and thank you very much.
Perfect timing. We have like 5 minutes and a little bit for questions. How about we start with Eric, and then we go over to you, and to you with the blue shirt.
Super interesting. I guess I'm wondering whether, like, social media is one where network effects and scale effects are sort of obviously, this is a sector where you expect these things to be very strong, right? And so I'm wondering how the external validity of this for other sorts of industries or products. But you could even look at this, I think, maybe even within the set of apps. There are going to be some apps that have a stronger network effect than others, right? And I suspect that you're going to find it stronger. These effects are stronger for the ones with stronger network effects.
I see. I think it's indeed I didn't differentiate different kinds of apps. So right now I'm just clasping all the apps together, and also the variations that I'm using, it's actually from different categories. They're evenly distributed. So I didn't differentiate app categories, but I think the network effects here is mainly not come from the consumer side, which you think is usually the network effects for social media, but it's actually from the network of developers and data sharing networks. So that's the network effects that I think I can see in this paper justify protectionist policies. But I think the network effects from the consumer side is also very interesting, and it's something I was worth look at in the following follow-up work. Yes, Steve.
Thank you. Super interesting talk. Have you thought of looking at excess stock returns for domestic beneficiaries versus adversely affected foreign companies or their parent holding companies around unanticipated blockages or certain policy events? That could be super useful, I think.
I think that's very interesting, but I think it's more data demanding that I need to maybe spend another 1 year on data collection. But I think that's indeed something worth to check.
Hi, Arno. Oh, sorry. Postdoc at MIT. Congratulations on the fascinating paper. I have a question about the quality of the domestic innovation that is being produced by the Chinese firm, because so you report numbers on the quantity of libraries being created. I'm just wondering, from a welfare perspective, do you have numbers or anecdotal evidence about whether these new domestic innovations are comparable, better, or worse than the foreign innovation?
Yeah, I think that's the purpose for my competitiveness measurement, because I want to see whether foreign apps are adopting more Chinese technologies after the blockage, and that's the outcome for the competitiveness part. But I have to admit, I don't have the competitiveness of Chinese apps. This is just for technologies. But anecdotally, right now, if you look at the top downloads at the US app list, the Chinese apps at least have maybe 3. So yes, does that answer your question?
Right, Zhou, you had a question.
Your study was of China, and there are a lot of discussion in other countries, not of protectionist actions, but of actions like Elon Musk refusing to obey the laws in Brazil, and various platforms refusing to obey the laws, and blockages. And the question has been whether that blockage, because of their failure to comply with the laws, would be good for the country. You might call it a protectionist measure, but I would call it enforcing the rule of law, or negative. Do you want to speculate about whether South Africa and Brazil should enforce their own laws in order to actually enhance their digital space?
That's a very difficult question. I think like the point that in the paper is that digital markets is a very has a very strong network effects, and if there's any industry has this kind of future, we probably need to think about, if we want to develop domestic innovation, how that's some factors we need to take into account. But I cannot speak for other countries, so this is what I found in Chinese mobile apps industry. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We are out of time, and let's give another round of applause.